My name is Allie, and I want to welcome you to this Monday's live paint along. So I do these demos every Monday at 5 Eastern, and these are hour-long demos, and I teach something a little bit different every week. So I teach, they're all kind of small because we like to get this all done inside of an hour. And right now we are doing a little floral mini series that we're just starting, and we are doing the Zinnias paint along today. So I always like to kind of give you a quick run through of how this works. And as you all are jumping in here, please say hello in the comments. I see many of you are. Hi, Betty. Hi, John. So how this works is these demos are totally free to watch every Monday. I have lots of you that do all over the world, which is pretty awesome. But I also put together a outlines download for you. So if you decide this looks like fun, you really want to try it out, you want to paint with me, I put these outlines available for you on my website under paint-alongs, and what it does is it gives you a printout that will give you the outlines of what we're painting, and you can then trace that onto your panel, and then you can paint with me and kind of start in the same place that I am. Starting these each week. So check those out if you want to paint with me. Also, I should mention many of you are painting with me live, which is awesome. If you are, please drop that in the comments because we like to see that. But also, you can watch these as a replay anytime. So these are always available on my Facebook page, Allie K Studio. If you just click on media, you'll see videos, and under that tab, you'll see all of my previous videos. And also I post them to my YouTube channel on Tuesdays, so you can find them over there too if YouTube is your preference for watching these. And if you get the download, it includes a list of the paint colors that I use, and it also includes a link to the video, so you can go back and watch it afterwards and kind of paint at your own pace if that's what you prefer. And so many of you are saying hello. I appreciate seeing everybody. Hi, Betty. Hi, Diane. Hi, Kathy. So many of you are here. I love seeing it. Hi, Dawn. You're painting with me. Awesome. Also, I should tell you that if you are painting with me, make sure that you are a member of my group. It's a free group, Allie's Paint Friends. That's where everybody posts their paintings, and it's always so much fun after these demos to see what everybody did during the demo and kind of see everybody's different take on the same painting, which is really pretty cool. So make sure you're a member of that free group too. All right, so you guys want to get started? Let's get started. We have a lot to paint tonight, but I think this one's going to be really fun. Flowers, I think everybody knows here, are my favorite. Maybe if you just found me, you don't know that, but I really like painting flowers, and I've been doing some fun zinnia paintings lately, so everybody wanted a little zinnia class. So you get what you want around here. You just gotta tell me. All right, okay guys, let's get started, shall we? I'm going to bring in the camera a little bit. We'll bring it in a little bit more here. Let's see, Els in Australia, welcome, hi. Okay, so let's make sure we can see everything. I always like for you to be able to see my reference image and my palette. Also, I know I've mentioned this before, but I want to tell everybody again in case you haven't heard it. If you want to watch this on a bigger screen, you can download the Facebook Watch app to your smart TV. And then you could watch my demo on your TV, and you could put the reference image on your tablet like I am. I always like to look at my reference image on a screen. I never print it if I don't have to. So that's one little tip. I would suggest, looking at the class on the big screen and the reference image right next to what you're painting, and that works really well. So these are the outlines, and if you trace them onto your panel, then I have you just paint over them with like a light purple, just to cover up those pencil lines. And so we've got Beth in chat. Awesome. I'm in Chattanooga, and I know I don't always have too many local people, so welcome, Beth. Love seeing that. So we just made a light purple from Alizarin Crimson, Payne's Gray, and white. And I am using golden fluid acrylics. These are my paints of choice, but you don't have to use golden. You can use what you have available, but I include a list of the paints that I will be using from golden with the download. So let's get started, shall we? Okay. I hid my brushes under here in this little compartment. I forgot where they were. Okay, so I'm going to start by finding the shadows. So I pretty much start all my paintings kind of the same way after I've got the outlines. I'm going to mix up, let's see, my palette is dry here. I never clean it, so that's why we've got all of these dried splotches of paint. Okay, so we're gonna do Alizarin Crimson and Payne's Gray. We're gonna mix those together, make a nice purple color. I'm just thinning my paint with water here and making a nice soupy puddle of it, and then I'm kind of scraping my brush on the edge of my palette to offload it a little bit. So I've got this nice and runny, and I am just going to compare light and dark. So I'm gonna start up here at the top, and I see that this flower is lighter than the background. So I'm going to start washing in the background behind it with this kind of dull purple color, which will make the flower appear bright. We've got this little window triangle right here that's background, and same thing over here. So I'm just washing in the shadows that are behind the flower, because the flower is lighter than the background. And I'm using square tip brushes. That's what I like. I feel like I can control the shape of them really nice. This is a number 3. This is a Royal Langnickel brush, but I always say I'm really not very picky about the brand of brush. I just like to have a nice new clean brush that is gonna keep its square shape nicely. If your brushes are starting to split on you, throw them away and get a new one, and just buy cheap brushes, and you can do that a lot. That's my opinion. Okay, so we're just like finding these large windows of dark. So I'm kind of painting around the shapes that have been outlined. I've got this little triangle of dark between these two stems. And now the center of this flower is dark, but it's got like these little star-shaped pieces. Somebody will know the technical name for those, but I don't, that I've outlined. So I'm kind of painting around those and just getting this dark part in here. You'll notice I didn't outline all those little bits because that would just be silly and it would take too long. So we don't need to do that. Okay, I've got a dark shadow that kind of comes in between these two petals. You guys see it on the reference, so I'm just gonna put that in there too. And then I'm gonna keep going with this background wash. You can see how I'm holding my brush pretty far back. That allows me to get more motion out of it, not get hung up on being too specific and detailed. So I always say hold your brush probably at least halfway back. That's why they make these handles so long, just so you know, those of you that are doing it like this, you've got the whole rest of the brush to use, so use it. Not to sound strict about it, but I am a little bit strict, especially if you come to one of my live classes. I'll walk around and catch you. Okay, so let's keep going with that blue. Well, it will be blue. The dark blue background is what I'm washing in. Sorry to be confusing. Okay. I just think it's easy to find these nice big shapes of dark, and that helps us to just kind of put the other areas into perspective. Okay, we've got a little chunk of dark blue that's coming in right here. I didn't put the bottom outline of it, but I just want to find that little dark shape because I think you can see it right there. Okay, now let's look. We've got a dark area at the base of this flower, and the stem here is dark up at the top of this one, but then it kind of fizzles out. To see how it gets brighter here. So here the stem is darker and the background's lighter. Here the stem is brighter and the background's darker. So you gotta pay attention to how that kind of flips. Anthony says, yes, you told me more than once to hold my brush back, not in the middle. That's right. Anthony's been to a live class. You know what I'm talking about. All right. So let's keep going with these shadows. We've got a little bit of shadow going around this top of the stem on this one. I should mention to you guys, I'm trying to look back at the comments, but if I do miss your comments, please just to still include them. I always go back on Monday nights and scroll through and I answer any questions that I can. Oh, we've got another little window of blue here that I didn't put in, and it is right next to this chunk of stem. It's pretty much dark against dark. So I'm gonna put that in there, and then when we go back and push the color a little darker, we'll separate those two planes. Same thing here, this is pretty dark. All right, it's pretty dark around the top of this stem, and we've got a little window of blue peeking in there. We've got a dark shadow that I outlined there. Now we've kind of got the underside of these petals that are outlined. So these are kind of dark up towards the top. So I'm just gonna catch that edge. See how these petals stop? Those are the ones that are in front of us. So we're just gonna catch that underside of those petals. All right, and then I've got this little tip of a petal, which is right here, that's in highlight. So I'm gonna catch the dark behind it. And I've got another little bit of dark here. We've got the dark center of this yellowy orange one. So I'm gonna wash that in dark right here. Painting around those little bits that are in there. Whatever they're called, somebody can drop that into the comments. All right, and here is this dark chunk of green stem. You guys see this shape right here? I'm gonna put this dark shape in right there. And one more little stem coming down right here. I need to mix up a little bit more of this purple tone. This is again Alizarin Crimson and Payne's Gray that I'm mixing, and I'm not going to worry about mixing it exactly the same. It really doesn't matter. All of this is going to get covered up. This is just us finding shadows. So let's see. Now this red flower, like it's magenta, you see at the top how it's brighter than the background and it's dark behind it? Down at the lower left side, it's got this bright pink flower behind it. So now that lower left side is dark. Do you guys see that? So I'm just gonna wash this in dark here. And I outlined quite a few petals here. I probably outlined a little bit too much for the sake of a demo. So I'm not necessarily going to be painting around all these petals, but I'm just gonna find some of these dark shadows here and kind of pay attention to where the highlights are. It's kind of dark in here. We could put that dark center in, that'll help to anchor it a little bit. And then if we kind of paint around these little white ones that are coming out from the center, if we just paint around those a little bit, that'll help us. I don't want to go all the way up to the edge here because like I mentioned, that top edge is light. So I want to leave that top edge light so I can separate this. But it's starting to give some dimension, showing these little folds of petals. Like I said, don't get hung up on doing every single one because you'll drive yourself crazy. We don't want you to go crazy. Okay, so here, this is the outline of a dark one. This is dark. Then it gets light and we've got dark behind it up here, dark up here. So I'm just basically painting the whole painting in monochromatic grayscale. That's what this step is, where I'm just comparing light and dark, looking on which side of the line is it light, on which side is it dark, and that's what I'm representing. And sometimes both sides of the line kind of have the same value. in which case we'll be able to separate them once we start putting the colors in. So sometimes two planes might kind of blend together in this stage, and that's okay. As long as you can still see the outlines that you put down, you're gonna be fine, because you'll be able to separate those planes later when we add the actual color. So we're just comparing each side of the line. Which side is light, which side is dark. Kind of working our way around the whole painting. You'll see I don't like just get hung up on painting one flower perfectly. I like to get some color all over, because that way I don't get too specific. Oh, we have a little stem over here. Yeah, that helps me to stay loose, putting a little bit of color everywhere instead of just getting all tied up on one piece. This is all kind of dark here. Okay, now we're going to go in and we're going to push the darker shadows a little bit darker, which is going to help me to kind of separate some of these forms. So I'm going to go back with the same two colors, Alizarin Crimson and Payne's Gray, but now I'm going to have a little bit less water in there. So it's going to be a little bit more opaque paint, and I'm going to use this to push those areas a little bit darker that I see are darker. So I'm going to look for the very darkest places first, and one of them I think is this stem. So I'm going to go right over that, and you see how pushing that layer darker is going to separate it from the background behind it, which it was kind of sucked into before, but it's only dark up at the top here. And then it's pretty dark in the center of this flower, so we're going to go back with another pass right here. Don't worry about keeping those shapes exactly the same in the center. And then I think it's pretty dark in the background up here, and by pushing this background a little bit darker, it's going to make those petals that are in highlight come out at us. So that is one area, or one way to make an area feel darker or lighter, is by doing the opposite in the area that surrounds it. So same thing here, I'm going to push the background a little darker there. It's going to make that stem kind of come out at me. Same thing up here, we're going to push this background a little bit darker. And I don't need to fill the whole background, I'm just pushing it darker where it's against that edge, because that'll make that edge really pop. Pretty dark right here, this bit of stem. Same thing down here. So finding these dark anchor points where I can see that it's really the darkest, that's what's going to kind of help me keep sense of what's going on here, because we have a lot of flowers here. And so it's easy to get lost, but if you find where the darkest darks go and save those lightest lights, that will help you to keep the flowers in the right places and to not get too overwhelmed with all these different little shapes that we have going on. So just really hold tight to where these dark areas are supposed to be and make sure you get these in the right places. Moving along here, we're going to push the background darker here against this edge of this magenta zinnia that's up in front. Push this background a little darker. Got some dark edges of these petals. And doing all of this groundwork, I call this all the underpainting. This is really what sets the stage for the rest of the painting, and this is how I keep my brush strokes really loose as I build color, because in this stage, I am really being pretty tight as far as making sure I'm putting these in the right places. So that when I know where everything is supposed to be, then when I start layering in those top layers of color, I can be pretty quick about it because I know that these are in the right places. I know that the shapes and the values are already built up correctly. I don't have to second guess like if the flower's in the right place or if the petal is represented correctly. Because I've built it all up in this stage. All right, I'm gonna do just a little bit more dark, and then we're going to get into the fun part where we do the wash and we start building up some more of the color. So yeah, I think this is a good amount of shadow that I've built up. One little tip I can give if you are doing this process on your own is if you need some help building up these shadows, try looking at the your reference image in black and white. That'll help you to compare and stop seeing the color and start seeing the shadows. Bambi says you're creating a roadmap for the values. That's exactly right, Bambi. You know how I'm doing it. Yeah, so this is what's gonna keep me on track. Okay, so now we wanna make sure all of these shadows are dry before we do a wash over them. And this is always the point in the demo where I kind of have to scoop up some of my wet paint because I want to keep moving, but I don't want these to be wet. So I just have a couple little droopy drip areas here that I have to scoop up, and then I'm going to do my wash. So what am I going to do for this wash? Let's see here. I am going to pick complementary colors. That means opposite on the color wheel. So I'm going to do, for these two pink ones, I'm gonna make a teal because pink and green are pretty much opposite. So I'm gonna make a teal using phthalo green blue shade and phthalo blue green shade. These are both really strong colors by Golden. So I'm just gonna use a tiny bit of each one and a lot of water. And I'm going to wash over these pink flowers. This is super, super wet. Do you see that? Because we don't want this to get too dark because if it does, it's gonna be hard to build up those bright pink tones. So we know that this flower is gonna be pretty bright pink, and so my underpainting is going to be a bright wash. So again, this is phthalo blue green shade and phthalo blue green shade. And I have those paint colors listed in the download if you get that. I have every paint that I purchased that I'll be using here. Okay, so we're gonna wash that in, and now we're gonna do this one too. Same two colors with this teal. And you see it's starting to drip, and I'm just kind of catching it as I go. And why don't we do it down here too, because this is going to be a pink color over here, and a little bit darker here. This is going to be a slightly darker pink, so we'll wash that in. Now this one that's going to be magenta, I think I want to have a little fun here, and I'm going to do that one a little bit different. I'm going to do that one a different shade of green, just to mix it up a little bit. So for that one, I'm going to make a green using phthalo green blue shade. I'm going to put some yellow in there, some Hansa yellow opaque. And then I'm going to dull it down just a little bit with some pyrrole red light. And I'm going to add some water. So this is going to make kind of a lime olive green, sort of. I'm going to put a little more green in there, a little bit more red, I think. I like to kind of dull down my greens, make kind of like an olive green. So again, this is Hansa yellow opaque, phthalo green blue shade, and pyrrole red light that I'm making this color right here. And I'm going to use this to wash over this bright magenta one. And you're like, why are you doing this? This is crazy, but trust me, I've done it before. I know why. It's gonna make these top layers pop by putting the opposite down, and it's just gonna be really fun to get some of this color in here. So we're just gonna drop that in everywhere that's gonna be this magenta. And I think we'll do the same thing over this flower that's in the background. These two that are gonna be pink, we're gonna wash in with this green. These background pieces. There we go. And what else do we wanna do? Okay, that's all really wet. All right, so the orange one, I want to put purple for an underpainting under our orange flower. So I'm gonna use Permanent Dark Violet for that. That's one of my other favorite underpainting colors. And I'm gonna wash it in really thin because this orange flower is really bright. So I'm just gonna wash that in. Put it really thin, maybe a bit too thin. Okay. And now, what am I gonna do next? Let's pick the color for the blue background. So, actually, why don't we do purple for this flower too? This flower is kind of an orangey peach color. We're gonna wash that in with purple. Okay, there we go. I might have to pump up this purple a little. I did it so thin, I can't really see it. Okay, so my background, it's going to be blue, so I'm going to wash that in with kind of a burnt orange color. And the color I like to use for burnt orange is Alizarin Crimson and Hansa Yellow. Those two together make a really nice, fun burnt orange. It's Hansa Yellow opaque, so it's actually a little bit opaque. And our background's already pretty dark from the wash, but I'm just going to go back over it with this kind of burgundy color. Push that a little bit more. And I think we'll do this burnt orange right over the green too. So this bright green, I'm gonna thin it out a little bit. We just wanna cover up all the whites. And orange, since this is kind of a reddish orange, this will work to go over what will become the green stems. Let's see, someone says, what brush size are you using? I'm using a big one now for the wash. This is a 9. These are this one's a Blick Essentials, which is a pretty good, like inexpensive pack of brushes. It comes in a 12 pack and it's like $13. So if you need a whole pack of flat tip brushes, the Blick Essentials from Dick Blick are pretty good for that. Okay, we've got this last chunk over here. I'm just gonna do this all in the burnt orange color. Anything else that's not colored yet is going to get this burnt orange. All right, so we have all of our white covered up, yay! And I think, let's see, do I need to go make anything else a little bit darker? Maybe not. Actually, this one down here, I wanna make a little darker. I wanna make that teal a little bit darker. So I'm gonna get my brush nice and clean. I'm gonna go back to my teal recipe, which was phthalo green blue shade and phthalo blue green shade. And I'm going to just wash over this one a little bit more. Make that a little bit, it turned out pretty blue, but that's okay. I like that blue. And maybe I'll do the same thing kind of in this underside of the flower here. This is pretty dark. And we'll make this a little darker too. So you're kind of matching like the areas that you know will be dark. You're gonna do the wash of the underpainting kind of dark in those places. The areas you know that'll be light, you make your underpainting light. All right, so this is pretty wet now, and we really want it to be dry. So I'm just going to say a little prayer that this dries pretty quick, because I need to be able to start layering on top of this. I'm gonna scoop up anything that's dripping. So if you're doing this on your own, if you're watching the replay, you know, this is the point where you could step away for a few minutes if you're not teaching 100 people online. But I need this to dry. So I'm just gonna scoop up what's left here. I think, let's see, these highlights, this teal's pretty dry, so I can probably make that color. So let's make this highlight of magenta. And now that we are moving on to the next stage, we are going to start thinning our paint with medium instead of water. So I'm using Liquitex matte medium. I'm not picky about brand. You guys can use any medium. I just like, as we layer, to kind of get the transparency of the medium versus the drippiness of the water. So these first layers are washed in with the water so that they dry quickly, and then we can keep going. Okay, so this magenta we will make using a nice clean white. Mine's a little contaminated. I wish it wasn't. Got to find a clean spot on my palette here, and a little bit of quinacridone magenta, which is one of my favorite colors from Golden. I don't know if you guys can see this color on my palette. I hope you can. It's a beautiful pink color. I need some clean white. If your whites are contaminated, it's really hard to get a bright color. All right, this looks pretty good. And I'm gonna put a little bit of my glaze in there. Oops. Thin it out with a little bit of glaze. And we will start pulling out the highlights of these petals. And I'm going to leave little bits of the underpainting kind of poking through. And I always say this, it's really easy to get carried away and forget to do that, to just start putting all the petals in and forget to leave that fun teal. And I promise you, you will wish that you left more. So in this early stage, just really be conscious of not filling everything in. We can always add more later, but it's really hard to get it back. So just kind of think about it. It's just fun to see it poking through. My teal was a little bit wet there and it blended in. I wish it didn't. Okay. So again, this is quinacridone magenta and white. And I'm just kind of working my way around, dropping in these highlights and starting to kind of give some form to these petals. So I'm letting that teal and some of those shadows that I put in, I'm letting those kind of serve as my, my shadows. And I'm building up the highlights. And I'll build the highlights up a little bit further. We kind of do this in stages, so we're gradually working our way towards the brighter highlights. And one thing I like to say is, so I'm using, this is number 3, right? And I'm putting in like these big strokes. I'm not doing a bunch of little hash ones. If I have a big area to fill in, I just put a big area down. Thank you. Let's see, I think Judy just said that you shared it, the video. Thank you very much. And thank you for reminding me. I'd like to ask, kind of when we're in the middle of the demo, if you guys would hit the share button if you are enjoying this demo. It means a lot to me. It means a lot more people will see my videos. And it really helps me out a lot and allows me to keep doing this every week for you. So if you're enjoying this, if you would please hit share and let me know that you shared it, because otherwise I can't see it necessarily. I always like to be able to thank you because I appreciate you taking the time to do it. So that's that. All right, we got some highlights, kind of got some petals in this flower. We're gonna move over to the next one. And here this petal kind of goes underneath. I mentioned how these are in shadow. Now these petals are a little bit different colored. They're a little bit more of like a warmer red, but for right now, I'm just putting them in with the same magenta color, and I might tweak them a little bit later if I have time, but not really necessary. Catch a little bit underneath there. And then we've got some of this color down here. I'm not gonna put any detail in this flower down here. This is just kind of background. Got a little bit of it coming through there. Okay, so let's keep moving along. I think this one's dry, so I wanna put some color in for that bright orangey yellow. Thank you, Christy, for sharing and letting me know. I appreciate it. So let's mix up this orange color. So we're going to make that using Hansa Yellow Opaque, Pyrrole Red Light, and White. So we're gonna, I hope, can you see this color here? Yeah, I think you can see my palette. A little bit of Pyrrole Red, more of the Hansa Yellow Opaque, because yellow is not as strong of a color as red. So we're gonna mix those two. Actually, I don't think I'm gonna put any white in there yet. If you already did white, I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna start with just the Pyrrole Red Light and the Hansa Yellow Opaque, because that makes a pretty nice tangerine orange to start out with. So let's drop that in here. Some nice fat brush strokes. Still leaving little bits of the purple though. Don't forget to do that. And is going to help us to remember where these petals are. It's getting a little bit confusing. We don't want that. Okay, so there's these little bits going over the center. I'm just going to put a couple of those in. And I'm going to let these petals, or this layer, I'm going to let this set up and dry before I come back and start pulling out more highlights. Same thing with these pink ones. I need this to dry before I can start pulling the highlights even further. But while I have this bright orange on my brush, I can see the center of this one needs this orange. So I'm going to dab that in there, and that helps to give me a reference for where that is. And then I'm going to move along, and I'm going to put some color on our deep magenta flower here. We're gonna start covering up that green because that looks a little bit crazy, right? So we're gonna make that magenta using quinacridone magenta and white, but we're gonna obviously use a lot less white now because this flower is a lot darker than this one. But I think we can get to that color using the same two colors. So I'm actually just gonna go back to the same little spot on my palette here, and I'm just adding more magenta to it. So let's see here. We're gonna just go along here, and we're gonna pay attention to where these little white bits are and make sure that we paint around those so that we don't get those lost, because that would make the center a little bit confusing. And like I said before, we don't need to have all these petals be in the exact same places. It's okay. Don't let that kind of tie you down and get you all worried about all these petals, because I know this flower has a lot of petals, but what we're worried about is like getting the essence of the flower. We want to make sure the overall shapes are in the right place, not every little petal. And we can kind of tweak the placement of these petals after we get some of this color down. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm gonna let this set up because we want that color to dry before we start layering the highlights on top of it, right? And got a couple more flowers to put some color on. Let's do this one down at the bottom. This one, it does have more of like a rosy pink to it. So I'm going to add a little bit of my Pyrrole red light to the mixture. So now we've got quinacridone magenta, Pyrrole red light, and white in here. So this is a slightly different tone of pink, and I'm going to drop this on top of this teal color that I put in, but I'm going to not cover up all the teal, right? Just enough to make it feel like the flower. I maybe did a little too much. And I see some of this color behind this flower, so it's a little bit darker though. I'm gonna add a little more magenta to it. And I'm just gonna drop some of this color into the background to cover up some of that brown. You see this little flower poking through. And actually, I see some of this color on these two that are in the background, but there's more white. So let's add some more white back in. And it's these same three colors. Let's just put a little bit of color on the background in these little flowers that are showing through. There we go. Okay. Now let's put in our navy blue background. I think that's gonna start to make the whole thing feel like it's making a little bit more sense. So we will make that navy blue using phthalo blue. I'm sorry, not phthalo blue, Payne's gray. Sorry guys. Payne's gray and white, if I can find some somewhat clean white. And I'm gonna add some glaze in there to let some of my brown poke through. Maybe I just wanna do those two colors. So it's Payne's gray and white. I think I'm gonna start with just those two, put a little glaze in there. And I'm going to, yeah, I like that. I'm gonna put that into the background, still letting some of my brown red tone in the background show through, because I think that's gonna look nice against this dark blue here. And you can see how pushing this dark tone in the background, it's making the flowers come at us. But I'm not gonna do the same blue across the whole background because that gets boring. So we are gonna vary this up a little bit. We'll probably add a little more white to it in some places, but I'm just kind of starting with this mixture, still leaving that background color showing through. You see how I'm also changing the direction of my brush strokes? I'm kind of twisting my brush back and forth. That just makes it keeps it interesting. This dark. Okay, so now I'm going to add some white to it. I want to brighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit more white. So this is kind of like a denim blue. So we add a little more white, and then we're gonna start putting some of this into the background. Still just Payne's gray and white. I think somebody commented how it looks really blue. So Payne's gray actually is navy blue. They just call it Payne's gray, but it really is a nice dark navy blue color. So now we're gonna drop this color in the background. You see how it's a notch or two lighter than the blue that was there? And I'm just kind of letting it play with that color. Kind of, like I said, I'm changing the direction of those brush strokes, letting it overlap in some places. All right, starting to give it a little more form. Okay. All right. We're getting there. Okay, now let's put our green stems in. So let's start with this bright green stem that's in the background, because I feel like since that one's missing, it really like needs something there. So let's make that bright green, and we will make that from white. My white's a little contaminated, but this is going to be okay for this part. We'll make that from white and Hansa Yellow Opaque, and just a tiny, 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 tiny speck of phthalo green blue shade. That's a very strong color. And so then I'm gonna put a little glaze in there to thin it out. You can just get so carried away with that phthalo green, so don't use too much. Okay, I'm gonna drop this nice bright green stem in here. It's just gonna pop. Oh, I guess I was supposed to put a little chunk of blue in between those, but I didn't. Okay, so yeah, I think that's the only spot that I have a green that bright. I think it is. Okay, now we need to make an olive green for the rest of this stem. So we're going to make that in a new spot because it's not going to have nearly as much white. We're going to make an olive green using Hansa Yellow Opaque, tiny speck of phthalo green blue shade, and some pyrrole red. Remember, we did this recipe before for the olive green. Same recipe. That pyrrole red is what neutralizes this crazy intense phthalo green. So you can kind of see the difference here. I think you can see it. Can you see it in my palette? Maybe. There you go. This is what I'm using. This olive green. Okay. And I'm going to put that into this stem right here. And then it gets really dark up here, so I'm not even going to put it in, well, maybe a little bit right there on one side. But then I need to make the rest of the stem darker. And some of this green is on this one in the background. We've got a little chunk of it right here. We've got this other green stem. This stem right here is pretty dark. I'm gonna need to make that darker, but for right now, I'm just gonna put it in with this olive. Got a couple little bits of this olive on this one, over this stem over here. Okay. Oh, we've got some along the top edge of this little bit right here. So I'm treating these all with the same olive green right now. Okay, I think when we put these center pieces of white in, I think that's gonna make everything look better too. So let's go ahead and do that. So that white is not really gonna be white. We're gonna neutralize it a little bit. So you know what? Why don't we just go back to this white green that we already made? The one that we used for this stem. Let's just use that because it's already mixed. And we'll just use that to do these little center pieces. And that'll be fine. I think I left an extra one there, but it's okay. So we see more of them along the top edge. Here we just kind of catch the tips of them. There. I like that. Okay. Let's do these little yellow doodads around the center of this one to give that one like a focal point, right? So this yellow we will make using Hansa Yellow Opaque, tiny speck of pyrrole red light, which makes that nice kind of tangerine orange, but I'm also gonna add a little bit of white to it to make it a little more opaque, a little bit more pastel yellow, I guess. Okay, so we're going to put some of those in the center here and add a little more red to it. Sometimes when you layer yellows, if you're doing it on top of a green, you have to emphasize a little bit of red in there because otherwise it makes it look too green because that underpainting's coming through. So when you do these little center pieces, just don't do them too perfect. It shows if you do them too perfect. Let them feel kind of random. And we've got some over here too. We're gonna drop those in. And we've got some bright ones over here. Little bits. And I'm gonna brighten that up right there too. Okay. We've got this bright like white flower that's in the background here. And then there's another purple one. So let's just put those little white chunks in because that's gonna make this stem make more sense. So let's go back to this yellowy green recipe. Let's add a little more white into it and a pinch more yellow. And let's put that chunk in. This is gonna be really bright here. So it's really bright right here. See that? And over here. Okay. And we've got some of those little bright center pieces over here. The center of that one. And maybe we can put some of that in there too. Put a little more texture in there. Okay. I think there's one more chunk of brown left where I haven't put any color at all. That's right here. That's this purple flower. So I'm gonna make that purple with permanent violet dark and a little bit of white. So we're just gonna add that chunk of color in. Need a little more white. And then we're gonna start pulling out more of these highlights, which is going to look really nice. Okay. Because we haven't done a lot of, well, really haven't done any of the highlights on these petals. We've just kind of started dropping them in. I guess we didn't do this flower, did we? Let's not worry about that one for right now. Let's worry about the other ones, because the underpainting wash is purple, and that kind of works. So let's start up here, and let's go back to our bright pink recipe, which was quinacridone, magenta, and white. And we're just gonna make a white that's gonna be a notch or two brighter than what we have there. And we wanna make sure we're working in a nice clean spot on our palette. And I'm running out of them. I think I have a clean spot here. Yep. Okay, so this will be white, little bit of quinacridone magenta, but it's gonna be like mostly the white. And if your brush is dirty like mine, it's gonna kill your color, so I gotta clean my brush a little better. Be nice if I had cleaner water. Okay. White and quinacridone magenta. And I don't really want any glaze in there right now because I want this to be opaque. I want this color to stand out on top of what I've put there. So I'm looking for the brightest areas. So this petal right here feels pretty bright. I think I need even more white. Yeah. The edge of this one feels pretty bright. This one. And so I'm not filling in all of the areas where I put color. I'm just picking the areas that feel like they're brighter and pumping those areas up. If I put this bright pink everywhere, it'll ruin the effect of creating shading because it'll just take over. So I'm just looking for the very brightest areas. And you'll notice I'm not trying to blend these colors at all. I'm just picking a spot and laying down the color and letting it sit on top of what's there. All right, this one's pretty bright. Okay. So then let's move over to this one. And I mentioned how this has just a pinch of red in it. So I'm adding a little bit of pyrrole red to my mixture to make it a little bit warmer and a little bit more white. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna find these brightest spots and drop this extra highlight on top of these brighter areas. This has got a bright spot right there. Never got this little tip right here. You see how that's actually darker? I'm gonna make that a little darker. So I'm gonna go back, add a little more magenta and a little bit more of that pyrrole red. And I'm gonna catch those edges and make that a little darker because that was kind of missing. Same thing there, put that in. So see how it kind of just gives that extra variation, having those different tones that are kind of running through? So these are the same three colors, pyrrole red, quinacridone magenta, and white. I'm just gonna drop some of this darker pink into this one too. I think that looks good. Just gives that nice variation of tone. Okay. Now let's go in and put some highlights on this yellow one. Okay, so we're gonna use the same colors that we were using on this one, but now we're gonna use some white in there. So we were using Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and white. Actually, I think we were just using the yellow and red there, but now we're gonna put a little white in there too to make it opaque and a little bit lighter. And we'll start to pull. You see how bright that is? Yes, that's gonna make those petals just like jump out at us. But again, we're not gonna put it everywhere. We're just gonna put it in the places that are the very brightest. Maybe I don't want it equally bright everywhere either. Ooh, too much red. I'm still leaving those little windows of some purple that are just kind of popping around here. A little more red. Put a little bit right there. We've got some like big areas of red right here between these two flowers. So I'm gonna add more of the Pyrrole Red, kind of adjust my mixture and put those like bright orangey red tones in that I'm seeing there. These kind of are in shadow right here. There we go. That felt like it was missing. And actually, I think we need a little bit of that in the flower too. A little bit right there. Yeah, I like that. Those little warm values make a difference. Okay, now let's put some highlights on this magenta one. So, do you remember what we used for the magenta one? It was just, it was magenta and white. So we're just gonna use magenta and white, but a little more white now. So it's quinacridone and magenta and white. And I'm gonna keep this opaque, so I'm not gonna add any glaze in it. And I'm going to just kind of work my way around. Oh, I think I need more white. Yeah, it doesn't show up. Okay, I'm gonna go around and find the petals that are in highlight, or find some that are in highlight. Doesn't have to be the same ones. It'll be fine. And we don't want to treat the whole flower the same. So some areas are not going to have petals that are in highlight. Some areas are just gonna be dark. If you go around the whole flower and put like the same amount of petals in the same places, overlapping the same, it's not gonna look very real. So kind of make sure that you hold back from doing that. Like I see that this side has a lot more shadow and there's a little bit more of the petals showing up on this side. So try to stop yourself if you need to. And I'm probably gonna go back and push these a little bit more, but I need to let this set up before I do that. So I'd like to mix this kind of neutral color that's behind this one. So this is kind of like it's kind of like a dark peach. So I think I'm gonna make that using Pyrrole Red Light. I've got a clean spot there. And some white. But I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow, Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, white. But I'm gonna add a little purple to it now. And that's gonna knock it down. That's gonna neutralize it and make it a little bit more of a neutral, darker color. Put a little glaze in there. Okay, and I'm gonna use this to paint this flower that's kind of in the background here, that's kind of dark. It's almost like a brownish tone, and I'm gonna put some highlights in here, but for right now, I'm just gonna put this kind of neutral color in. So again, this was Pyrrole Red Light, Hansa Yellow Opaque, white, and a little bit of Permanent Dark Violet. And I'm gonna use the same thing on this one back here. These two are kind of neutral, these flowers back here. And yeah, now we're gonna add a little white to it and put some highlights in there. So same recipe, just adding a little bit of white. And I'm gonna use that to kind of paint around that petal. That's gonna make that stem come out at me, having this bright section behind it. Got a bright petal right there. A little bit right there. So this mixture is looking a little bit more neutral than some of the other colors because we've got complementary colors in it. We've got some yellow and some purple, and those two being complementary are going to cancel each other out and be a little bit more neutral. And I see some of it kind of in this neutral shadow here, but this shadow needs to be a little bit darker. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little more purple here to that recipe. Kind of make this muddy neutral purple, and I'm gonna drop that in right here. And that's gonna make those other colors pop out by putting this nice darker purple shadow in. That is looking pretty good, I think. We probably are over on time. We're right at 6, we're not too bad. Okay, so I need to pump up the darks in the center of some of these. So I'm going to make that dark center from Alizarin Crimson. And let's see, I'm gonna do Alizarin Crimson and just a tiny speck of white and some yellow. More Alizarin Crimson. It's gonna be like hardly any white and yellow. It's gonna be mostly Alizarin Crimson. So it'll kind of make like this warm reddish brown. So I'm gonna put that in the darkest areas here at the center of this one. And same thing here. I'm gonna push these little bits that are the darkest here. Same thing here, covering up that green center that I left, making this nice dark center. I've got a little bit of dark right there. I'm just kind of looking around anywhere else that I see this nice dark red color. I see it a little bit in some of these shadows, so I'm gonna drop that in with this nice dark color. A little bit of shadow there. Kind of the edge of this flower. Like I said, that edge is really dark. Got some dark edges here. Yeah, that's making those other colors really pop out, adding this dark tone. So I mentioned how we needed to do this dark green on the stem, and I see it in a few other places on the other stems. So I want to make that nice dark olive green. So this green isn't going to have any white in it. We will make this green from phthalo green blue shade, little bit of, tiny bit of Hansa yellow opaque, and then we're gonna add Alizarin Crimson to it. Alizarin Crimson is one of my favorite colors. It's like a nice dark burgundy, and unfortunately it's on back order right now from Golden, so I'm having trouble finding it. But as soon as I get it, I'm stocking up because it's a great color. I think you can get it in small bottles, like 4-ounce bottles, but I buy the big ones. I always buy a 16-ounce bottle. Okay, so again, this was Hansa Yellow Opaque, Phthalo Green Blue Shade, and Alizarin Crimson is making this really dark olive green. You see how nice and dark that is? That makes that stem come out at us really nice. We've got this stem behind here that's gonna pop out. I probably need to make that stem a little fatter there, but we've got a nice dark stem down here, and then this stem that's in the background here was kind of lost. It needed to be much darker. And I'm gonna make this one a little darker too here. And this little bit here. Yeah, this was missing everywhere, having this nice dark olive green color. Okay, we are getting really close to wrapping up this demo. I do want to just push some of the highlights a little bit more. I think particularly I want to pump up some of these yellow ones a little bit more, and it would be really nice if I didn't have muddy water, because then I could get a really bright yellow, but I'm going to do my best. So I need a nice clean white, and I'm going to make this bright yellow from white, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and just the tiniest speck of Pyrrole Red Light. But it's going to be mostly white and the Hansa Yellow to make it really, really bright. And I'm going to barely touch my Pyrrole Red and make a really, really bright yellow, and hopefully it'll stand out on top of what I've got here. Cross your fingers that it's going to show up. Yeah, it shows up. Cool. So you see how that's looking brighter than everything else that was there? I think these little center pieces are brighter. And you guys notice I didn't even switch to a small brush when I do the center. I just kind of caught the edge of this square tip brush. So don't feel like you need to stop and switch your brushes all the time. You know, you can sometimes get in a pretty small area with a big brush if you just kind of twist it. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit more yellow back in, a little bit more red. Make it a little bit less of the white and just catch a few more of the other little highlights. Okay, that's probably enough. Yeah. So where else do I want to do a few more little highlights? I think some bright white around the center of this one would be really nice. I'm going to go in with pretty much straight white. Maybe I'll touch that little yellow recipe a little bit that I just used. But I want to just, oh, my white got a little dirty. It's going to be okay. I just want to catch the edges and just get a few places that look like bright white. Just a little bit. All right, we're real close, guys. I think, what else do I want to do? I want to push the bright white on the edge of the stem, or I'm sorry, the bright green. So that was Hansa Yellow Opaque, Phthalo Green, and some white. I just want to make that bright green pop a little more. My yellow is kind of contaminated. We're getting to the point of the demo where I've run out of spots on my palette. I'm using 2 palettes. I don't know if you guys noticed. These are from Hobby Lobby. And I always need 2 because I just take up a lot of space. Yeah. It's getting a little messy today. We got a lot of colors. Let's just push this. Yeah, that stands out. We need some more white in there. Yep, I like that. I don't see this color on this side, but I'm just gonna do it because I want to. And do I want to put this anywhere else? Because I feel like it's just right here. I'm gonna put some right here because I want to. Maybe right there too. All right. Anything else we want to do? So I see kind of like this bright reddish pink here. Right now I did this all with the magenta, but I want to add a few little pops of more of a reddish pink. So to do that, I'm going to add a little bit of that Pyrrole Red to my magenta and just put a few little bits of that in there. And then we will call this demo done. So this is going to be Pyrrole Red, magenta, and white that we're going to use right now. And we'll just catch a few little edges there just to mix it up a little bit. Yep, I like that. Just a few kind of different colors mixed in there. Maybe a few of these little petals will get it too. It just kind of changes things up a little bit. I'm gonna put some maybe on these background ones. Right here too. All right, how much over am I? I think I want to do some pops of blue, just some tiny ones. So I'm going to do phthalo blue and white in just a few little places. I'm going to, oh, that's dirty. I need a new spot. Phthalo blue and white kind of makes a fun little blue sparkle that I like to drop into my paintings. Not necessarily because I see it, but just because I want to put it there. So I'm just gonna do a little phthalo blue and white and maybe put some glaze in there to thin it out. I just think the color will look nice with some of what we've got going. Maybe I'll put a little phthalo green in there too. We're gonna kind of mirror that teal color that we used for the underpainting. So I like to kind of sandwich the underpainting in with the overpainting sometimes for fun. So let's see, where should I drop these little bits? Let's put some right here. I'm kind of doing it in the background, kind of hugging around some of these shapes. It just gives it, I don't know, a little something. It's like some playfulness kind of jumping around. It's usually like kind of hugging the edges of forms. And sometimes what it does is it kind of just like cleans up the forms too. But you don't want to do like a perfect line. I got a little carried away there. Kind of thinking about the strokes. Okay, that's kind of fun, but I think I'm gonna do too much if I do any more, so I should probably stop. Okay, we're going to call this one finished. I'm gonna zoom in so you guys can get a still shot. I will post in the comments a photo of my completed painting. And then often I will kind of work on it a bit more on Tuesday morning, so I might tweak it a little bit. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for watching this demo. Thank you for sharing it. If you haven't hit the share button yet, I would really love it if you would do that and just let me know in the comments that you shared it. You guys were great, and I will see you again next week. Next week we're gonna paint an iris. I'm really excited about that one. It's gonna be like a big close-up of a beautiful iris. So that should be a fun one too. You can watch for that download on my website. Should be there tomorrow afternoon. All right, thanks guys. Have a great night. Have fun, happy painting.